So you may have wondered if there's a big difference between the way a man should train versus the way a woman should train. And over the past decade of my career, I've worked with a significant amount of both men and women, and I have to say that the differences within their training sessions are actually very, very minimal, which is unusual based on what we would expect, right? If we look at the stereotypical cliche idea of what a man would be doing in the gym, he's going to be in the weight training section. If we look at the stereotypical cliche version of what a woman would be doing in the gym, they might be holding the pink small dumbbells or in the cardio section. Not to say that this is necessarily true, but it definitely was quite prevalent, let's say 5-10 years ago, and some of it still exists to today. However, this is quite the opposite when it comes to the woman that I work with. Every single client of mine, irrespective of their gender, is prescribed a weight training program. Not only that, they are encouraged to lift super, super heavy. And my clients don't want to pack on a huge amount of muscle, at least the majority of them don't. They want the traditional, typical things that we all want. They want to be a little bit more toned in their midsection, their arms, their legs. They want a little bit more definition. And that means that every single one of them is prescribed some form of weight training. With that being said, there are some considerations to be aware of. They're not necessarily too major, however, I do want to go through them and make sure they're clear today so that you can optimize your training based on your gender. And one of the first major differences comes off the back of quite a funny story. When I first started personal training, I didn't understand these differences to a huge degree. I understood that, of course, women would go through their menstrual cycle. There are significant differences in terms of the size of a woman generally versus the size of a man, but I didn't understand the differences beneath the surface. And therefore, when I would program the training sessions for my female clients versus my male clients, I might put 60 seconds rest for both a male and a female. And my male clients, they would get to that end of 60 seconds, they would start tying their laces, continuing the conversation and trying to stretch out the rest as much as possible. Whereas the females during the rest period, it'd be 30 seconds later, I would only be catching my breath and they would be like, "What's next, coach?" And they would just bounce back super, super quickly. Women typically recover a lot faster than us males can due to their hormonal profiles, the differences in metabolism and blood flow as well. So if we go through each of these in a little bit of detail and we start with the metabolism component, we know that glucose plays a major role in providing us energy, and therefore it's going to be super important to our training. When it comes to our fasting glucose levels, most of us males, predominantly across the course of, if you look at any research, you'll find that many men will have a higher fasting glucose level than most women. And what that means is we have a greater availability to maybe pick up something super, super heavy off the ground. However, when we look at the speed of glucose uptake, meaning the availability of that energy coming back to us, we find that women's rate is much, much quicker. And therefore that means they can go for longer when it comes to exercises. Their endurance is going to be a little bit better. So a male might be better at picking something really heavy off the ground, but when it comes to enduring that exercise, a woman is probably going to have the advantage here. From a hormonal standpoint, we're traditionally used to hearing the benefits of having more testosterone when it comes to being a male, and therefore being able to accrue more muscle and strength. And that is absolutely true. However, we miss out a really important component, which is a woman typically and most often will have a much higher level of estrogen than males, and that comes with some benefits as well. And quite often it means that they are able to recover quickly due to having a better abundance of that hormone, and therefore are going to be able to get back to exercising sooner than us men. Another aspect that might be quite easy for most of us to get our head around is that we know that we want a lot of good blood flow to our working muscles when we're exercising. We also know that a limited amount of blood flow means that we're going to fatigue quicker. And what we find in most of the research is that women tend to have a better blood flow than men, and therefore they can get more blood going to the working muscles and therefore be able to work out harder for longer. And it's also going to be clearing those metabolites that build up during exercise a lot quicker too. And finally, another difference between men and women is that women typically have more slow twitch type 1 muscle fibers than men have. And therefore those type 1 muscle fibers are much more suited to endurance exercises versus anything else. And therefore the more prevalence of those muscle fibers means that women will be much more suited and usually perform a lot better when it comes to endurance type sports and exercises. So you're probably thinking now, well, what does this mean from a practical perspective? How does this genuinely impact me and my training? So let's say we've got a man and a woman who are going to train together. They've both got 60 minutes and they want to do a very similar workout because they've got similar goals. Let's say that the man has 6 exercises, he has 20 working sets, and he's working at a rep scheme of 8 to 10. What might be more beneficial, because a woman can handle more volume, is to have 7 or 8 exercises in that same time frame. It might be beneficial to have 25 or 30 working sets versus the 20 that a man has, and it might be more beneficial to have a slightly higher rep scheme, somewhere closer to maybe 10 to 12 or 12 to 15, for example. And given the fact that women can also recover faster, something beneficial that you can do to pack more volume into your session is reduce down your rest times. If our male has a 1-minute rest period, it could be a good idea as a woman to take a 45 or 40-second rest period, and you're probably going to have the same level of recovery capabilities as you would have even if you took that extra 20 seconds. And it also means that women are going to have greater endurance during a session, and therefore maybe going for slower tempo exercises versus something like a power-based exercise, which might be more suited to a male, could be advantageous to getting the most out of their exercise and their workout. So to come full circle, men and women can train very, very similarly, and they might have very similar training programs. There are other differences, like the menstrual cycle that's going to have a role, and also that men and women might want to bias different areas of their bodies. Some men may want to have more chest-focused exercises, and that might not be something that a woman wants to do, and vice versa when it comes to something like glutes, for example. However, outside of this, the differences are pretty damn minimal, and therefore I encourage both genders, and especially women, to keep your intensity high, to keep training with heavy weights. And for those men out there, if you can't keep up with your partner who's a woman, or your girlfriend, your wife, for example, now you know why. So I hope that helps, team. Have an amazing, amazing week ahead, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon.